morning, viewers of HTV. It's a pleasure meeting you for this other edition of your program Week Review. Remember, the first part of this program does a recap of the news that ran through the week. In the second part, we shall be welcoming our guest, Lawrence Kede, who is a sports analyst. With him, we are going to talk about the postponement of the CHAN 2020 and the AFCON 2021. The last but not the least, we shall have our segment entitled The No Comment. For right now, don't go far. We shall be right back just after this pause. Let's open in diplomacy with the appointment of André Magnus Ekumo as the new ambassador of Cameroon in France. The appointment was made through a presidential decree this 30th June. He comes in replacement of Alfred Nguini, recently called back to Cameroon a year and a few months after his appointment. News of André's Ekumo appointment as Cameroon's ambassador to France has filtered for over a few months today and later reported fake until it was confirmed this week over the state radio. The new ambassador of Cameroon to France was before his appointment chargé de mission at the presidency of the Republic of Cameroon. In politics, Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea pledged for mutual respect at borders. After a two-day consultation between the Cameroon Minister of Defense, Joseph Betty Assomo, and his counterpart of Equatorial Guinea, Leandro Bekal Kogo, the two countries have taken the commitment to ensure mutual respect and fraternity at the borders for the good of both countries. This meeting aims at finalizing the agreement which was first of all reached between the heads of states of both countries in order to reduce the tension that exists at the borders of the two countries. In health, Cameroon's coronavirus cases continue increasing as the country now records 13,711 active cases with 11,114 recoveries and 328 death cases. These last figures were announced this Wednesday, 1st July during the weekly interministerial meeting of the committee in charge of monitoring government's anti-response COVID, presided over by the Prime Minister, head of government, Dr. Joseph John Gute. The Prime Minister does call on the health authorities to continue mobilizing in order to effectively and slowly eradicate the pandemic in our country. Still in health, the Minister of Public Health praises his colleagues for the relentless efforts they make in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, which continues to register the positive results in the country. In a message addressed to the health personnel, the Minister of Public Health, Malauda Malashi, said this high success rate is due to their unfailing commitment. He added that the sacrifices and the efforts made by these health personnel since the outbreak of the pandemic has changed the public perception of public health facilities in the country. The health boss does encourage his personnel and reassured them that the government will continue putting in place facilities for them to work in good conditions. Still in health, but this time around, let's talk about cancer, where Cameroon has adopted this week a national plan for the fight against cancer in the country. The policy, which has a duration of 15 years, aims at putting in place an optimal solution for the treatment of cancer patients in Cameroon. To achieve this, the country closely works with the World Health Organization. Let's listen to the representative of the World Health Organization in Cameroon, who tells us more about this national plan.
Today was for the Minister of Public Health to acknowledge the work that has been done in the country over several years to develop a national strategy or a strategic plan for the control and prevention of cancer in the country. So this has been a tremendous work over several years under the leadership of the Permanent Secretary for the Program of the Prevention and Control of Cancer, but also the leadership of the Ministry of Health. So when you read the document, you realize that in Cameroon, each year we have about 15,000 new cases of cancer and about 10,000 deaths due to cancer. And the mortality is high because most of the cases are detected quite late. So the case management of cancer at the late stage is more complicated. That's why the strategy emphasizes on early detection, but also on prevention. The strategy also highlights the fact that we have cancer which are due to infections. And the two good examples is the liver cancer, which is due to a virus, hepatitis B, which can be prevented by giving a baby at the time when they give BCG, the vaccine against tuberculosis. When the baby gets the vaccine against hepatitis B, this vaccination can prevent at a later stage the development of the cancer of the liver. The other example of prevention is the vaccination of young girls, 9 years to 13, which can prevent the cancer of the cervix. So those are the two programs which are being discussed in the Ministry of Health. The one for HPV, the prevention of cervical cancer, will actually start in September. And the one on hepatitis B is still under discussion. So there are strategies that can prevent the cancer through the vaccination. The other elements that you find in the strategy, it's related to risk factors. What are the risk factors for cancer? And those risk factors, major risk factors include tobacco, alcohol, unsafe food, particularly food which do not include vegetable and fruits, and also high obesity and lack of exercises. So again, the strategy tried to really put an important emphasis on prevention. What can be done as a nation to prevent cancer? So looking at those risk factors so that we prevent cancer to happen. And when the cancer is happen, how to detect the cancer early enough to give a chance to a person to survive. The WHO consider that almost more than 50% of cancers can be prevented. And so that's why the prevention strategy is extremely important.
That was the representative of the World Health Organization in Cameroon. Let's now listen to the head of the Department of the Fight Against Cancer at the Ministry of Public Health, who gives us more details on the implementation of this national plan for the fight against cancer.
Implementation has one major constraint. We need finance because we have made a planning for do that implementation. If they can pay, for example, material for help us to go to the community, we'll go there and give them some message. The main message is what they have to do to avoid cancer. Many people don't do exercise. They smoke day and night. They drink day and night. They don't eat good food. They just like fat. They don't like fruit. And how to tell them what is good for their health concerning alimentation. So that implementation will start by prevention, education, sensitization. We have now some NGO who can help us also Another message that we cannot fight cancer alone. We need to be together. So we will try to put in one place people who want to fight cancer with us, and we will share action, and every person concerned, if everyone do his job, you will see the cancer will be reduced. It's a matter of everybody, not only for the state, even the population can contribute for this fight against cancer.
Let's now move on to education, where final year pupils and their counterparts of the Francophone subsection sat this week for the common entrance examination and the concours d'entrée en sixième respectively. 180,000 pupils of Class 6 sat this Tuesday, 30th June for the examination. Unlike in the past years, the context is very different with the presence of the deadly coronavirus pandemic, which has already killed over 300 in the country. In regards to this, efforts are being made by the school authorities in order for the hygiene and sanitation measures put in place to be respected in order to protect the little ones. Let's now move on to this information from the Ministry of Communication, as the government of Cameroon is preparing to support financially few press houses, newspapers in the country. The first session for the examination of the various demands took place this week and was presided over by the Minister of Communication, René Emmanuel Sadi. A total of 100 demands from these private newspapers were to be analyzed, with 240 million francs CFA to be shared amongst those who will be retained. Our reporter was on the field and could get the speech of the Minister of Communication, René Emmanuel Sadi. Let's have a view.
Reforms aim to render the government's support for the private press sector more effective, taking into account the other mechanisms provided for in the legislation in force in order to avoid duplication. Audiovisual media companies are now eligible for financing from the Special Fund for Audiovisual Development provided for by Law Number 2015/007 of 20 April 2015, governing audiovisual activity in Cameroon, which is expected to go operational very soon. In the end, the reforms of which I have just presented, the main aspects are part of the government's resolve to provide effective support to the private national press, which, despite the excesses which unfortunately are still numerous, participates in its own way in the task of informing and training the population. They are, in any case, part of a body of reforms whose ultimate aim is to increase government's support to the press both quantitatively and qualitatively. Ladies and gentlemen, the emergence of a quality private press that is responsible and respectful of professional ethics and which provides decent jobs in our country cannot be the sole business of the government. In this regard, the contribution of the actors in the sector is of paramount importance. An observation of the national media landscape reveals a need to improve and to get rid of certain practices that do not honor the noble media profession. A few examples taken from recent events are sufficient proof of the importance of the work that remains to be done to achieve this objective, which I want to believe is shared by all. I therefore invite all of us to pull ourselves together to restore the press to its mission, which it should from no reason depart from. For instance, they will have to be strongly involved in the work of cleaning up their profession by getting mobilized for the implementation of a self-regulation mechanisms that will have to coexist harmoniously with the National Communication Council, currently in charge of regulating the sector.
Let's now move on to our sports page, where the African Nations Championship, the CHAN, has been postponed to 2021, and the African Cup of Nations has been postponed to 2022. This decision was taken this Tuesday by the Executive Committee of the African Football Confederation, the CAF, during an exchange through video conference in Egypt. Let's listen to the reaction of the president of the Cameroon Football Federation, Seydou Bombonjoya, who gives us his opinion on this postponement.
We really appreciate the fact that the African Confederation has decided to, because of the coronavirus, to postpone our competition. The AFCON 2021 to 2022, January 2022, and also we appreciate the fact that the CAF has decided to also postpone, because of the coronavirus, the CHAN from 2020 to 2020, January 2021. That's excellent news for us. We also appreciate the fact that Japoma Stadium of Douala is going to host the Final Four of Champions League. Also depends on the evolution of the pandemic in Cameroon, so it's still been will be confirmed. We appreciate the fact that the CAF Confederation, African Confederation, has also precised the satisfaction about all the effort that the government has done to be ready for these two competitions. We appreciate this, the fact that the government has been, the CAF has expressed this fact. It's an opportunity for me also to thank the government of Cameroon, and particularly and especially the head of states, for all the efforts that has been done, unbelievable effort that has been done to be ready for this competition. People don't even imagine what effort it is to build stadiums and to ameliorate the infrastructures, roads, hospitals, and all this. It's something very important, and we must be proud of it. And the most difficult is to be ready. And today we are ready, and I'm proud for that, and we thank the government for all the effort that has been done. And now the FECAFOOT, the Federation, the FA, has to be ready in terms of sport, technical support we have to now prepare ourselves. Now we have the dates, and we have to prepare ourselves to be ready for the final competition, and then to get the best position that we can have in this competition. I will not say win, but to be the best and give some more pleasure to Cameroonians. That's what we are all wishing.
Still in sports, Cameroon's infrastructures to receive major competitions are almost ready. This assertion was made by the Minister of Sports and Physical Education, Professor Narcisse Muile-Kombi, as he multiplies a visit on the construction sites in Yaoundé. He visited the Olembe and the Beyak stadiums and seemed satisfied with the evolution of the work in these sites. Let's have a view of the reaction of the Minister of Sports and Physical Education as he confirms his satisfaction in the advancement of these works.
Are progressing well, and I would like to encourage McGill to continue in this very good way.
Dear viewers, that was it for the first part of our program. Let's now move on to the second part of our program entitled The Guest. Welcome back, dear viewers. If you are just joining us, it's your program Week Review. We are in the second part of our program, and as we announced in our headlines, we are receiving Mr. Lawrence Kede, who is a sports analyst. With him, we are going to talk about the postponement of the African Cup of Nations in 2022. And the SHAN, the African Nations Championship for 2021. You've got it all. We are going to talk about sports with our guests in this edition of our program, dear viewers. And as we continue, we shall proceed with the female football championship, which has been cancelled. And our guest is going to give us his analysis on these topics as we shall proceed in our program. So we are welcoming our guest, Mr. Lawrence Kede, who is a sports analyst, as I said earlier. Good morning, sir, and welcome to our program.
Good morning, Vanessa. It's always a pleasure to be on Humanitarian Television.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having you two here. Today we are going to talk about the postponement of the African Football Championship, the SHAN, which was postponed to 2021, and the AFCON, which was postponed to 2022. As a great analyst that you are, I would like you to analyze the situation.
Well, it was obvious that with the advent of COVID-19, sports has been stopped all over the world, and even in Cameroon. So the Confederation of African Football had to take a decision concerning the CHAN. You know, the pandemic came into Africa just about 3 weeks before the CHAN was to be launched on April, and now has been postponed to January. And in January, we had to welcome the African Cup of Nations, and has been set 1 year ahead. So I think what we should understand is that CAF had no choice but to postpone these competitions, because in order to play football, you have a set number of rules that have been put in place by CAF owing to the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, if you want to continue your local league, every player has to be tested. The players have to be in a specific hotel. The hotel has to be disinfected. Even the bus carrying the players have to be disinfected. And if you want to play a local championship, all the games have to be played in one city. So we have so many drastic conditions under which football could not resume because, as the CAF president said it earlier, what's more important is the human life. That's why the African Nations Championship, CHAN, was postponed to January 2021 and the AFCON to 2022. And we know elections at the level of CAF is in March 2021. So CAF absolutely needed a competition before the elections at the level of the CAF Executive Committee. That's why we are going to have the CHAN in January. I think we can remember that the CHAN was put in place, was given to Cameroon as a preparation ground for the African Cup of Nations. So CHAN was a testing competition to see whether Cameroon is ready.
Yes,
so we had to play the CHAN. That's why we played the CHAN in January before waiting a year after to play the African Cup of Nations. So everything has been set for CHAN so far, and we are just waiting upon the competition. And by the time January comes in, I think we have about 6 months. So from now to 6 months to come, we just hope that the pandemic will be really under cover and football could resume.
Okay, can we say it was just because of this pandemic that the competitions were postponed? Or can we equally attribute that to the fact that some of our infrastructures in the country were not yet ready to actually welcome both competitions?
Well, for the CHAN, everything was set. Even the draws were made at the draws were made in Yaoundé. So we had the various pools, the group, and all the countries in the various group. We know we had one group in Yaoundé at Omisport Stadium, another group in Japoma Stadium. The Group C was to be in Limbe, and Group D at the Reunification Stadium in Douala. So everything was set, and these the various stadia, they were all ready for the competition. So for CHAN, there wasn't any problem. And even at the level of the African Cup of Nations, what we should understand is that we are playing a competition of 24 countries, and CAF requires that we have 6 stadiums. So what happened is that the first stadium was Amadou Ahidjo Stadium of Yaoundé. We had Japoma in Douala. We had a Reunification Stadium. We had Limbe, Bafoussam, and Garoua. So according to CAF standards, we had the 6 required stadiums. So we wanted what Ahmad called a bonus. So the bonus was the Olembe Stadium. So that would have come in as a bonus. And if Olembe wasn't ready by the time we had to begin the African Cup of Nations, there would have been any problem because we already had the 6 stadiums. So now I think it's one of the good parts of COVID-19 because it has given Cameroon at least 1.5 years to complete the Olembe Stadium. And I saw from your report that you see the Minister of Sports is already on the pitch of play to see how works are being, the advancement of works at the level of the Olembe Stadium. And we hope that 1.5 years will be largely sufficient.
Okay, so after this postponement, what is the reaction of our athletes? Like, what are they going to be doing? For those of them who are already qualified for these various competitions, how are they going to pass on their time?
Well, what happened is that the COVID-19 pandemic has different effects on different countries. There are countries where the pandemic, for example, in Egypt, you have 60,000 people affected. It's not the same like in Cameroon where you have 12,000 people affected. It's not the same like in Nigeria or in Ghana. There are other countries where you just have about 400 cases, 100 cases, or 50 cases. So the conception is different. So each country now develops its own mechanism of going back into football. A country like Burundi never stopped football. Burundi only stopped to carry out their presidential election, and their league has continued with fans in the stands. A country like Tanzania too has resumed football. 2 days ago, Tanzania played the final of the Tanzanian Cup between Azam and Simba, a game won by Simba 2-0. So in some countries, football is still going on. Other countries are still preparing to resume. Ghana has just cancelled their league. Egypt is already proposing a new date for its league. So the preparation of players is going to vary according to countries. In countries like Cameroon, officially football has stopped, but when you go down in the stadiums, go to Lonkak in Yaoundé or around Bepanda or Stade Sikam in Douala, you find our first division players, they are playing football on a daily basis, so they are keeping fit because they know the competition is coming. And I love the reaction of Clement Aroga, Cameroon's intermediate Lions. He said, as the CHAN has been slated for January, he is not going to wait for the Cameroon League to resume before starting his preparation. That means he has a group of 30 players that he has been working with, and before even we start playing football in Cameroon, the championship begins, he is going to already start his own preparation program, because what we should tell our viewers is that for footballers to resume football after a period when they stop for holidays or for something like the pandemic that has happened, footballers need 6 weeks of preparation to get back to their top form. So when we talk of 6 weeks preparation, we are talking of 1.5 months. So if the CHAN is in January, it means normally latest by November, all the teams should be set. So globally, the Cameroonian League will be set to resume by September or latest October, so that our players will be fit for the competition come January.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. We shall not talk about discrimination, but we are tempted to talk about discrimination as the female competition, football competition, has been cancelled. Does it mean that female football is not taken seriously in our country or in Africa?
Well, what happened with the African Women Cup of Nations is that CAF had difficulties in finding a country to host the competition. The competition was slated for November this year, but right up to June, no country opted to host the competition. Congo, Brazzaville, that was initially set to host the competition, declined the offer because rules are changing. CAF is trying to develop football on the continent, and you know the previous African Women Cup of Nations, we had 8 teams participating in 2 groups. Yeah. This time around, CAF is bringing the competition to a higher magnitude. We are going to have 12 teams to take part in the competition, meaning that we had 36 teams, 36 countries that were starting the qualifiers for the competition. Unfortunately, all this has been cancelled. People will talk of discrimination, but behind that, CAF is developing something else, something new, the African Women Champions League, which will concern women clubs. So, for example, a club like Louvre-Minprof, champion of Cameroon, will go continentally and play the African Women Champions League. It's going to help these girls in order to gain more experience and play more games and expose yourself to the world projections, because when you go international and play international games, that is where you are being scouted. That is where potential big clubs see you and can buy you off. So I think it's a good idea, the African Women Cup of Nations, but cancelling totally the African Women Cup of Nations it's a big blow to some of these players. You know, even some of our players in Cameroon were already about 36 years old, and they were hoping that maybe
that was their last
competition. They could play that. And now if they have to wait 2 years, by the time the competition comes in, some will be 38, others will already be 40, some will be even above 40, which will be difficult for them to match up with the pace of the competition. And one other last reminder is that the next African Women Cup of Nations that's going to come on in 2022 will be qualified. The best teams at the competition, maybe the final 4 or final 5 or 6, will qualify directly for the World Cup that will take place in New Zealand and Australia. Okay,
so still let's come back to the CHAN, which has been postponed, or better still, the African Cup of Nations. If we had actually held the competitions on those dates, do you think Cameroon players were up to the task? Like they could get to a good position in the competition?
Well, so far Clement and Roger had made a working program. I mean, never before in the history of this country had we get a group of players who were in camp for so long. All through the season, we got the best of our local clubs, and I think the players were already conscious that they are playing at home, and they really had to win this competition. Let's not forget that we had players that came back from Europe and America, those who didn't succeed in their careers. They came back home because the CHAN was there. So it really rekindled the spirit of the local championship, increased competition. And now many had been disappointed by the fact that they have postponed the CHAN. So we might lose some players because some of the players who prefer go and sign contracts out of the country than to remain and wait for January.
Okay, so we think our players were ready for the competition, and even though the competition has been postponed, we hope they shall do their best the next, that is in 2021, to win the competition.
January, we are just 6 months away.
Yes, just 6 months away to the competition. That's actually great. As a sports analyst and someone who is very close to sportsmen and women, I would like you to give a sensitization message in this period of COVID-19.
Well, in the sports world, we have really been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic because we live sports, we breathe sports. So what we should do is not forget to respect the barrier measures put in place by the state. And if you have nothing doing outside, it's better to stay at home. You know, the pandemic has come to change our usual habits. What happens with sportsmen in Cameroon is that every Friday evening, people meet somewhere to take a drink or so. So I think with the pandemic, people have learned to be much more responsible, stay home, and do basic things like washing your hands. So I think we should just respect the barrier measures and just be careful and take care of ourselves.
Thank you, sir, for coming to our program. We were with Mr. Lawrence Kede, who is a sports analyst. So thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure being on humanitarian television.
Dear viewers, we have come to the end of our program. We wish to thank the entire team of HTV, which mobilized for the success of this program. We thank our guest, Mr. Lawrence Kede. We thank for our technical support, Gianni Bloom, William Kamga, and Severin Ledoux. We actually hope you enjoyed the program and that you could actually get something from it. And if you did, dear viewers, let's take another rendezvous for next week, Saturday, at the same time, and of course, with the same pleasure. See you next time. Bye-bye.